Hello everybody, our gardening channel. Today we are going to be showing you how to make potting mix for a far less expensive and in a far more convenient way at a fraction of the cost. So let's get right into it. So you might be wondering, well, why potting mix? Of all the other types of soil types that there are available in the market, why would you choose potting mix? Well, potting mix is very important for starting seeds and small plants because of how fine it is. Lots of the materials in it are very fine, very fluffy. It does not have a lot of those big wood chips, all those materials that could potentially hinder your small and sensitive seedlings. That's why potting mix is the most ideal. But the biggest issue with potting mix is the cost. Any type of potting mix you'll find in the stores will be really expensive, and probably one of the more if not the most expensive you'll find at the store. At my store, 1 quart of potting mix will cost $1.16. That's, if you add it up, that's a lot of money, and you're not really getting that much quantity for the price that you're paying. Now, the potting mix we're going to be showing you how to make today is going to be at a fraction of the price. From the materials I was able to source in the nearest store from me, it cost me a total of 31 cents per quart. Compare that to the $1.16 for the potting mix that comes ready. That's literally a third of the price. So let's get into it. Okay, so now for this mix, let's talk about what you should get. What I got was garden soil. And I found after many years of use that this actually is the best. I've tried many types of potting mixes and garden soils and all kinds of different mixes, and I found that there really is not that big of a difference between a very fancy type of potting mix and this garden soil after it's filtered. There really isn't that much of a difference. I've been doing it for many years, and get any type of garden soil, any type of thing that has that compost inside of it, that peat moss, because these will generally be mixed sometimes. But one thing that they will have is a lot of big materials, and we're going to get into how to get rid of those really big materials. Next thing you're going to need is perlite. Perlite is fantastic because, as I said, this stuff does tend to be a little bit on the denser side. Even after it's filtered, it holds water very well, so we will need some perlite to loosen it up, allow for more of that drainage, and it should really help a lot. Another thing you can add is some additional peat moss and or coco coir, but that's not really necessary, as I found, because this already holds enough water, so I really don't think it's that necessary. And so and just to make it clear, this is we're gonna show you the way that I do it here, but you can be really creative with it. You can source all kinds of different materials, be creative, experiment with it. There's no set up rules here. I'm just showing you the way that I found works for many years for me for a relatively inexpensive cost. Okay, so now let's talk about what not to use, because although there's lots of things you can use, and if you be creative, you can find many things that I guarantee will help. There's some things that you should just not add, and one thing I don't recommend is the big bulky store-bought compost. And the reason for this is because I found that lots of these store compost, these locally made compost, they're really made for they're kind of like a mulch. They're not really meant for potting mixes. I've tried them, as you can see here. They're really woody. There's not that much fine materials inside of them, and mind you, this here is after I added more fine materials, so it really is coarse. So I don't recommend adding pure compost, and if you're gonna add pure compost, please make sure to use something that's really decayed, like it's very fine, and make sure to filter it, as we're gonna show you how to filter this potting mix as we make it. So just keep that in mind, and obviously don't add any wood chips, pine bark, all that kind of stuff. You want it to be as fine and as fluffy as possible. So now we're going to get our garden soil, our container soil, whatever soil that it is that you're able to find, in-ground soil mixes, and we're going to put them in a strainer. Now, one thing that's really important with this strainer is that it's really fine. Like, you want it to be really fine, and you don't want it to be too large so that particles like this don't get inside. I actually think this would be a little bit on the more larger side, so if I could, I probably would get something slightly smaller, but for the most part it does its job. And you can find these in many places, hardware stores, on the internet, online stores. You can also make one. As you can see, I just got some screening here and connected it with some wood, and it's been working for the past 4 or 5 years, so it's been pretty good. So what we're gonna do now is very easy. We're just going to finally run it across. We're gonna run the soil across the screener. We're not gonna push down on it really, because we don't want to do that. We're just gonna move it across and let gravity do the rest of the work. Anything that's fine is going to fall through very easily. And we're going to continue until all we really have left is woody materials, wood chips, that kind of stuff. So as you can see, all the big particles, all the things that would have obstructed our small little seedlings, they're mostly gone and out of the way. And I think this would be enough, honestly, filtering. You don't want to get any of those large pieces in. So you can just, throw those aside, use them as mulch, anything. Okay, so after we finish filtering, we're going to have this very nice, fluffy material here. And, the nice thing about getting these potting mixes or soil mixes is that they do come with some nutrition. Most of them come with some kind of fertilizer, organic fertilizer, so that's really nice. And you can see the material here is very fine. As I said, there are some small pieces here like this, because as I said, I could use a filter that's definitely smaller. But for the most part, I'm really happy with it. When you squash it, it's holds very well and it comes apart really easily. So this is really ideal type of potting mix. However, as I said before, this stuff can hold water quite well. So what we're going to do is add 1 part perlite for around every 10 parts of this potting mix. So let's show you how to add that. So let's add the perlite, and when you're dealing with perlite, just be careful because it does have a lot of dust and stuff. So for this solution, you're going to want around 10% perlite. So let's add this, and you can see here it's a very porous material. So what you're going to do is mix it, and actually I think that might be enough because you can see when you can see that there's a lot of white, there's clearly a lot of white in the material, then that's basically means that you've added enough. I might have added a little bit extra actually, but you can see now it's mixed in very well, and this should drain really well. And so after you finish, you should of course observe your potting mix. Does it feel fluffy? Is there too many big particles? Ask yourself these questions. How fine does it feel? Is the moisture good enough? So when you're doing potting mix, just observe, make sure you have everything according to how you want it to be. And as I said, you guys, be creative. You can add so many different things. You could probably add many different types of fertilizers, amendments, all depending on what you grow and what your objectives are, what types of plants you're starting. And finally, let's just discuss any potential issues you might face when doing this potting mix on your own. And the biggest one that I've really seen is pests, because when you get some of these materials, these cheaper materials, they're not sterilized like a ready potting mix, a potting mix that's ready. And so sometimes I've read people have had fungus gnats, they've had small insects, they've had fungal issues, actual fungal issues with their plants. And so I think the best thing you can do is that if you do face any of these issues, is that you should just heat up your potting mix. Just put it in the oven for half an hour. I found that works really well. I personally have never had any issues with that. And in order to deal with pests, especially fungus gnats, because fungus gnats are the biggest issue in my opinion from these types of potting mixes, just add mosquito bits. They're very cheap, they're very inexpensive. You only have to add a small amount for every part of potting mix. It will kill the larvae. You'll face no issues whatsoever. So although you can have insects or fungal issues, I find that it's actually very rare. As long as you have a very clean environment in the inside, and as long as you don't overwater it, it should be generally fine. As I said, fungus gnats are going to be your biggest issues. Add mosquito bits, and if you do have any other issues in the future, make sure to in the future preheat your potting mix to sterilize it completely from any pests. And heating it, that'll take care of the issue if you should face anything. So yeah. Okay everybody, so just to summarize it, all you really need is any type of garden soil, any type of inexpensive potting mix, and any type of drainage. Just follow the instructions in this video and you'll have a very good basic potting mix for today. And as I said, and I've repeated myself many times, be creative. Make stuff that works for you. Find the materials that work in your area, that work very well. And just to make it clear, when I say garden soil, please do not use topsoil. Do not use any type of topsoil. You only want stuff that's made for potting, or stuff that's made as amendments, if that makes sense. And so everybody, that's what we have for today. I hope you guys found this video useful. You know, gardening does not have to be expensive. Growing your food does not have to be expensive. You know, this is meant to be fun, not it's not meant to drain your pockets. So I hope you guys found this useful. If you guys have any kinds of suggestions, any kinds of mixes that you made on your own, any types of recommendations for, you know, sourcing materials, please put them down in the comments below. And I appreciate you watching this video until the end. Thank you very much and have an amazing day.